you have the power through art to rewrite the narrative that you are going to push life forward with.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Sweet Madness Podcast. Today is a special one because today we have the first guest ever on the pod, as the people say, I guess. It is Mr. J.K. Larkin.
Hello. It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy that you agreed to be on my podcast. This is so exciting. Who is J.K.?
Oh, who is he? J.K. is a 20-something-year-old living in his parents' attic in Long Island currently. But he's an artist. He's an animal lover. He's a deep thinker. And he's very excited to be here talking to you about some pretty heavy things.
Yay. Yeah. For the heavy things. Heavy things, right? This is the Sweet Madness Podcast, if you didn't know, where we talk about everything sweet and everything mad and everything in between and how we navigate through this life. JK, how did you and I meet?
Oh my goodness. We met 12 years ago? I was just a young thing back then.
That's a big question mark.
That is a big question mark. We were doing community theater in Flushing, and you were stage managing the show that we were working on, I think.
Choreographing? Which show was it?
Ragtime?
Oh, I was choreographing.
You're choreographing.
I did stand in for stage manager for one night, I think.
Yes, and I remember that night in particular when I have... Like, you know when you have little memories of big events and it all comes down to, like, one frame? I picture you in a headset in that frame. I very much do.
I love me the headset. It makes me feel in control. So what have you done with theater since the community theater days when you were, like, 12?
Sure. Well, back in the day, it was a lot of community theater and high school productions when in high school, but I eventually moved to Manhattan, and I pursued a BFA in acting with a second concentration in directing and a couple minors, which I'll go into more about later, at Marymount Manhattan College on the Upper East Side. And it was a wonderful 4 years. I learned a lot, and it was a conservatory program, so it was very hands-on. A lot of seeing productions in person, a lot of late nights, a lot of rehearsing for experimental productions, and a lot of exciting things that you wouldn't necessarily get out of the community theater experience that most people are drawn to. And nowadays, what that's brought me to is being a board member at Royal Star, helping found Alternative Theater's Long Island location with another one of our friends who has worked on a few productions with us in the community theater circuit. And just trying to find ways to diversify and bring emotional vulnerability and expressiveness into the arts where we can.
Yeah, I think emotional vulnerability is very important, especially in theater, because you're up there and the goal of theater is to tell stories.
Yeah.
Of actual characters. They may be fantasy characters like Cinderella or, Shrek or everything like that, but the root of their character is human feelings. It's human emotions. I love seeing characters that like people can identify with, and it's very important to diversify the scope so that, all audience members have a chance to kind of identify, and then hopefully something identifies with their real life. Mm-hmm. In these stories, whether it's an emotional thing that they're going through, whether it's a breakup, whether it's like family stuff. I always appreciate how stories can heal. Mm-hmm. Drama therapy, I think, is so great. And I actually have a friend who is a drama therapist. But, JK, is drama therapy one of your minors?
It is one of my minors. I probably should have just gone into that. That was not necessarily what I went into my college program with the intention of, but my college did happen to have one of, I think, 2 collegiate minor programs in drama therapy. It's not something that's studied on the undergraduate level all that much because therapy and counseling is a licensure track in the United States of America. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, that's really more of a focus that you'll see on the graduate level. Mm-hmm. But drama therapy was something that I found, I guess, late into sophomore, early into junior year of college, when I was at a low point in my acting department. And I was at a low point in finding ways that I could still be happy and engaged in the arts. And I would look back to 10 years before that point, when I was 9, 10 years old and first starting out in theater. And at that point, I didn't remember much besides being a pretty unhappy kid and being very insecure in myself and needing some way to escape that and be anyone other than that. Find some sort of outlet, some sort of community that could accept me being someone other than I was expecting myself to be at that time. Mm-hmm. For 10 years, that was my theatrical expectation, the track that I had put myself on, and for a while that had worked. But once I got to college, where it was this competitive program where everyone had this massive talent, and it was no longer about running away from something, but running towards this goal, this career, it became a lot of pressure, and it no longer was this place that it was safe to be yourself and to express these emotions. And I really had come to a point where it was either, do I transfer out of a college, do I transfer out of a program and into something completely different and start fresh, or do I find the thing about theater, the thing about arts that originally made me feel so comfortable and chase towards that? So drama therapy was really a natural thing that I found through, like, one class in college. Our teacher was a licensed drama therapist, and she just taught us through drama therapy exercises that I still do weekly by myself in my room at my desk. It's great. You hold on to those little things. You hold on to those mechanisms that teach you how to cope with the everyday idiosyncrasies that weigh you down, that burden you, that are grievances that we don't necessarily want to be held hostage to. And it's freeing. It's cathartic. And yeah, it's
very cathartic to become a whole different character and then use it as therapy. Like, it's almost crazy to me how you can heal yourself by becoming someone else. Even though deep down, like, you're great the way you are. Like, I'm not saying, you know, like, become someone else and you will fix this problem. But the reality is that, you know, we're always a work in progress as human beings, right? We're never fully fixed because change happens every day.
Yeah.
And you've heard me say this numerous times when I've directed, when I've choreographed. I say, let it go to let it flow. And in this sense, like, becoming someone else, you're kind of letting your own emotions go out of your body, but by way of understanding another person's point of view, because you're becoming that character, right?
I definitely get that. Yeah.
Obviously, like, the relationships we have influence us, and the conversations we hear from other people influence us. So, you know, when you're having a problem and, you know, maybe you're the person that listens to your friends' problems, in a way, just listening to their problems might actually give you new perspective on your own crap.
It does. It absolutely does.
It's all about just, like, the human connection and the emotional connection, and just the connectedness just makes such a difference in how you go about your life. Mm-hmm. The one time that I remember that I had theater as sort of like that therapy, similar to what dance did for me when I was younger. Mm-hmm. In 2017, my grandmother, who I was really, really close with, passed away. She is the whole reason why I got into theater. She would sing The King and I. Like, she would sing Getting to Know You, like, on her radio when I was a baby. So, like, I grew up hearing old, like, classical musicals and watching them on her VCR, because that's what she used to watch.
That's so cute.
And I was you came to see it. I was in The King and I playing Tup Tim, which was not appropriate. But I was in The King and I. So the way that it worked was the place that I was doing it at, the company I did it with, was we had like 2 separate runs. We had one run for like a month in one location. We had a month off, and then we had another run in another location. My grandmother passed away during the second run, and I had to do the show the days of her wake and the day of her funeral. And that's right, I did a Vanessa Hudgens. I remember I was backstage and about to go on, and I was like, I don't know how the heck I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but this was her favorite musical, and I'm in her favorite musical. I need to do this for her. This is my actual goodbye to her. And just having that switch in the mindset, doing it for her, got a lot of emotions out. Like, Tup Tim was a very emotional role. So Tup Tim gets, like, whipped. Like, severely whipped in the show. And that night when I did it, it was very cathartic. I just let everything out. And that's how I grieved her. I mean, I grieved her afterward, obviously, but I feel like if I didn't have that experience on stage, I never would have gotten to the point of my grief and coped with it if I didn't.
Yeah.
Like, if I didn't do that on stage, I'd probably be way more unhealthily grieving. Because, I'm self-destructive.
And we all are.
We all are.
We
exactly.
all are.
We're all beautiful messes, guys. So I think, like, theater as a way of coping with grief is just very powerful.
Yeah.
Very highly powerful. And that year also, like, there was another death in the family. And then my cat of 20 years passed away. I was choreographing Phantom of the Opera at one of the schools I worked at, and that came out in a different way.
Well, that whole show is about grief,
Yes, that whole show is about grief. And I had such a great time working there. Mm-hmm. But it was just a different sort of process because then I was in charge. So I had to make sure that I had to be a certain way for the children.
Yeah.
And that was unhealthy for me. That was unhealthy for me.
And that's an unhealthy thing that we all put on ourselves every single day that we go out to our work, every single day that we're going out to a family event. We're all putting up these caricatures of ourselves in order to protect the world from what that grieving is, from what that coping could look like for us. Mm-hmm. It's so nice when life lines up, not that it lined up, but when life has the coincidence of a death that works with our grief, when you are able to use your performance in a production like The King and I to heal through that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you don't have art with you at the time, and it's just the loneliest place you could be, and the grieving process ends up being just as meaningful, but coming from the entirely other angle of it. Mm-hmm. When I was 19 years old, I was in a very abusive relationship for 4 or 5 months. And when I got out of that, I was 4 or 5 months without the arts. I had completely removed myself from myself, been isolating from people I cared about, so much so that there wasn't an opportunity for me to express myself to a large group of people, to heal through that cathartic experience. And what I turned into for another form of like expressive grieving was writing. And I would just come home and write things that I remember seeing, things I remember doing, how things had played out. And I would almost, I was, as I know you are as well, I was very connected to rom-coms growing up. Just rom-com storylines, every romantic comedy movie. My parents and I have seen every single one. They're all listed. It's great. I think that what I loved about rom-coms, and I know that what my parents are drawn to beyond belief about rom-coms, is that it's always the same 14 movie beats. The screenplay is always going to play out in the exact same way. Mm-hmm. You know who's going to end up together from the first beat And it's going to happen, and there's nothing that you have to worry about. Life isn't like that.
Right.
You know, we're recording the Sweet Madness podcast right now because that is what we're living. And relationships that you expect to play out one way aren't going to always. And it's horrifying. But you have the power through art to rewrite the narrative that you are going to push life forward with. Your rom-com that you're writing in that sense probably isn't going to end up with the couple together, because it probably shouldn't, but... you know?
Yeah.
But not every rom-com ends up with them together. It does end up with the protagonists having completed their hero's journey. It always ends up with those same beats playing out, and... drama therapy isn't always performing on stage for 1,000 people to see you feeling, but it could be writing to yourself, to your audience of one, so that that most important audience member truly can believe that narrative moving forward.
And it's so important to make you the number one audience member, because this goes to how we treat ourselves as human beings. Like, I don't know about you, but for me, I'm the most harsh on myself.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we often forget, like, especially when it comes to relationships, treat yourself the way you would love others. Treat yourself, because you're all you've got for the rest of your life. Like, your relationship with yourself is the most important one. And I'm still struggling with that. I struggle with that every single day. But then I come back to theater and stories, and I'm like, oh yeah, here are other perspectives. How can I take from those other perspectives and other characters and twist it so that I can then treat myself and give myself qualities that I want in myself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the big lessons that we learned in drama therapy was about taking on roles. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very fun in a way. I guess that's the word for it. That when you're an actor, you have this resume and it looks nothing like what a career resume looks like. And you have a roles column, and you have a location column, and you have a show title column. And you quite literally accumulate these roles that you've learned to play, these stories, these characters that you've learned to take on, to grieve with, to process beyond that which an audience member ever would be able to. And in the same way, we as people are born into this life having, like, just the roles of breathing and eating and crying, and then we learn to walk, and we're a walker, and then we're a student, and then we're a daughter, a son, a mother, a father, a priest, you know? Mm-hmm. These roles we learn to take on, and in one way it's a burden. In one way, it's so many things that it stretches us and makes us expect so much more of ourselves than we should be. But in the other way, it's such a gift, and it's something to be so grateful for, that we can keep growing and we can keep evolving, even when our bodies technically tell us, like, oh, at 42 you're gonna peak and then you're gonna start deteriorating into nothingness. Like, no. You're always able to learn and grow and evolve, and so much of that is accepting that coping and grieving as a part of life.
I see what you mean about the negative aspects of it. Like, you're like, like, it goes into the identity crisis. Like, who am I really? How many roles have I played? Who am I? What is me? What is my voice? Who am I? 24601. So it's almost like, who am I really? But then it's also, like you were saying, a gift, because yes, you can still grow. You can still learn new things. You learn new things every day. And I feel like we often forget that we can still learn and we can grow every single day, every single minute. It doesn't mean we have to be expected to get to a certain point right away. Take your time. But it also gives you the ability to adapt to changes in life. Mm-hmm. Because you have played these many roles, you kind of have a scope of when certain things are appropriate and certain things are not. You have the ability to adapt in certain situations.
Life also gives us the opportunity to take in and perceive these connecting points and these threads throughout all of those, mm-hmm. that remind us that even when we don't have control, we are the control point. There was some quote that one of my teachers said in college that was something along the lines of, you are the most consistent person in every universe that you'll ever be in. And mm-hmm. whoever that you is, we all perceive that as ourselves, but you're always going to be with yourself. And when you're grieving, it's so important to remember that you do have all of the threads that are going to connect everything all within you already. You know, drama therapy and expressive arts like really helps people bring that out. But what's so beautiful about it also is that it's not really creating anything that isn't already there. Everything that you're ever going to need is always within you. So many therapies, so many things, and I don't mean to necessarily group religion into this, but so many parts of life are constantly telling us, like, something completely beyond your control, this powerful force, this structure is something that you need to bow down to, that you
need to submit.
You need to submit. You need to thank this thing outside of you for giving you the serenity and the grace and the knowledge or the whatever that even the government, you know, any of these systems wants you to believe that they're the thing to be thankful for. And there's a lot of things to be thankful for. Personally, I pick my parents, I pick my family, I pick my friends, and I pick those things because they're the ones that are reminding me that it's all here. It's all within us right now. You know, when I'm sitting here with you, all we're talking about is the two people that are sitting right here with the microphones, you know? Our connection points are ourselves, and we don't need anything outside of ourselves to have that. When we express ourselves through the arts, all we're doing is bringing that out and sharing that with the world.
Like, I have so many worlds that I'm a part of. Guys, it's the multiverse. We all have so many worlds. We have our Instagram world. Mm-hmm. We have our social media world in general. We have our school world. We have our friend groups world. The friend groups are worlds.
Each friend group
themselves.
is its own world.
It's its own world, and you are, like you were saying, you are the connector to each of those worlds.
And you could be a different you in each of those worlds, but you within yourself are still all the same you in all of those worlds. That's what's important to acknowledge. Like, sometimes we get so lost in each of these worlds that we lose ourselves, and we lose the ability to connect that all back to something. But having a story to tell, having a grief that can be coped with through stages, like, that's what brings us back to the central point. Yeah. And those friends that are really the most helpful, those family members, they're there to help you guide back to that. Or the good ones are there to help you guide back to that.
Exactly. I've had so many experiences where different friend groups of mine collided. And I didn't know how to act. But I wasn't acting. I was sort of just being myself. Of course, in the moment, I was very critical of how I was acting. But I guess grief kind of incorporated into that, because also it felt like a loss of who I used to be. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, you can grieve. Grief doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be depressing. It doesn't have to be sad. Like you said, it's acknowledging that we had something.
It's a loss. But it's also a found. You find something through it.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I see people from, like, back in the day, like in high school, and I just feel so different. I always felt out of place when I was a teenager. When I'm with those people, I'm sort of reverted back, but also it's like I'm in a weird time warp because I know I'm not that girl anymore. But then I just sit and I, like, watch. And I'm observing the environment and, like, trying to figure out ways to cope with it and figure out who I am in the moment. Yeah. And that's what we all do every single day. I feel like a lot of what like this Sweet Madness podcast is for is to just reassure people that, like, everything that they're feeling, everybody else, like, feels. Yeah. Like they're not alone in this. And kind of, like, stating the obvious, but, like, we also don't talk about that on a daily basis with people.
No, we don't. Well, I think that so often in society our egos want us to feel special. They want us to feel different, and they want us to feel like our story and our lifeline has this meaning that is not only different than everyone else's, but somehow better. somehow pushes beyond, because we're all striving to succeed in our own ways. We're all striving to meet our own expectations of self. But like we said earlier, like, we're our own worst critics. Like, if we're going to criticize our own paths that harshly, we're naturally going to want ourselves to be better than everyone else around us. There's nothing that brings us back to connect to each other. Like, if we're working as a sphere and we're each one point pulling off of that sphere, the further off that we pull, also the further away from each other we're pulling. Yeah. You know?
So, do you have any experiences with, like, grief and loss of...
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, the grieving that I've done through the arts has been, like you were just touching on, like, more of a grieving of what I have been and an acceptance of what I could be. After that relationship ended, after I got out of that relationship, I was still so traumatized by it that I felt this need to hold on to what I remembered myself to be, because I didn't think that without that memory of who I was, that I would ever be able to understand why it happened and how I could move forward in life from that. And when you're holding on to this thing that you know is broken, this thing that hurt you so that you could learn from it, it eventually just becomes like you're holding a bunch of pieces of broken glass in your hands and you're cutting yourself open. And that could be literal, it could be not literal, but either way it hurts. And you don't need to be doing that. You're holding the pieces all yourself.
Get yourself out of the hole.
Get yourself out of the hole. But getting yourself out of the hole sometimes does come with the additive that you have to move forward. You have to grieve. You have to accept that person you were, that version of yourself deserves more, deserves better than what they were in. And I think for me, like, what I would just do is, if I had a bad day, or if I had a relapse, or if I had a time where I was seeing someone that I knew I would come home and not feel good about myself having gone to go see, I would just sit down at my desk, and I would take out an index card, and I would write scene 1. And I would just, like, write how I got there, and I would write the things that I remember seeing, and I would remember scene 2, walking in and meeting some person and, like, what that whole environment was like. And I would keep writing scene after scene after scene until I got to me back at the desk writing those scenes. And then finally I would ask myself, why am I writing? Why am I doing this? What am I learning from? And I would teach myself a lesson. But I would have to do it in this distanced way where it was almost like I was watching myself as a character in a play from the third person, just living out the day that I just lived. That was how I grieved. And I think that, you know, drama therapy is a lot about creating connection with yourself, but a lot of that connection comes from distancing tools, comes from ways that you can take a step outside of yourself for a second, so that you can really, instead of harshly critiquing the position you're in, criticize and pick apart and reposition.
So it's coming from more of an retrospect observance.
An observance,
than
exactly.
to react emotionally in the moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because when you're reacting emotionally in every single moment, and you should be listening to your emotions, but when you're coming from a place of trauma, from not necessarily reacting to the truth of what is happening around you, those reactions aren't going to serve you necessarily. Those reactions are not going to be indicative of who you are and what your goals are and what you want for yourself. Those emotions can be channeled through an observance, through a meditation of sorts on them. But I think for a lot of people, a meditation's great. If you could do it, I am so impressed because I've never been able to.
I love meditation. I meditate every day.
I find that so impressive, and I wish I could. The closest that I have to meditation really is just very astute observation of self. And
that's what it is.
Well, with my eyes open and with a pencil in my hand. But absolutely, it's a meditation, and it gets a very similar result, and it really goes to show you that self-observation is so important to getting through it. Whatever it is.
It really is. And I've known people in the past who kind of get stuck in that grieving phase, but they don't take the step forward to get themselves out of the grieving phase, so they're stuck for a while. And that comes from fear of the whole thing that started the grieving in the first place. That starts the fear of that happening again. And it goes back to like vulnerability and strength, right? We're led to believe as a society, and we're told from our society that vulnerability is a weakness, when in fact it's like the strongest thing that you can be, because it's the healthy, like if you're vulnerable, you're getting your truth out. You're literally opening the door and shoving whatever crap you have out the door. And you know how you go about that obviously is your choice, either to do drama, through writing, through whatever you do to do that. But people get so stuck in the fear phase that they stunt themselves, and then they're mad at everything in the world because they're really mad at themselves.
Yeah.
But then they don't want things to change, but then they want change, and then and this and that.
We're so mad that we don't have control over the change. Because the act of the changing in this scenario is not something that, like, we don't get to decide the outcome. When we let go, we are letting go. We are saying to the universe, all right, wherever I'm in right now, this isn't good. Your turn. And the universe gets to say, all right, you're handing over the wheel. Let me take control of the steering wheel. Drive ourselves on a railroad trip. And that path that the universe chooses for you is beyond our control. And we're mad at ourselves for being in a position that we have no control over what's going on around us right now. We're grieving, but we're just angry at the grief. We're not able to get through it. But getting through it requires not having control over that either.
Right.
So really, you don't have any control over anything. But that comes back to, like, we have to accept that we don't have control over anything.
Exactly. And it's a hard mindset to change to if you have never been in that mindset before. It's a very hard mindset. That took me a while to accept that change is the only constant thing in the entire world. The only thing that is constantly happening and that you can be sure of is that everything changes every single day. If you had the same day every single day, you would go insane. Mm-hmm. And
Bill Murray did. They made a movie about it.
Which I've never actually seen that movie.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
But yeah, it's like we get into this mindset that we have to have control. And we do like control, but if we think we're in control, we're just setting ourselves up to be completely frustrated and emotionally out of whack when we find out that things don't go our way. It's like you were saying, you are the person to pick up your pieces. You are the person in the center of your universe. You have the power.
Yeah.
It's all about you and how you present yourself to yourself and then outwardly to others. Other than like your writing suggestion or, you know, types of meditation, do you have any like tips for anybody who is dealing with grief and loss?
You know, I think that this is almost like Sweet Madness, its own contradiction, but you can't search for what you're looking for outside of yourself. Mm-hmm. It's all going to be within. However, you have to get yourself outside of your house to do it. You're not going to get anywhere locking yourself in isolation. If you're stuck in the same environment as the same version of yourself constantly, you're not getting anywhere. The therapy is the progress. The expression is the world around you, and you need to let yourself participate in what that is.
So you're saying take action. You have to take some sort of action.
Yeah, and that action is a physical thing. Your body psychosomatically is connected to itself. Part of what we get when we're doing theater on stage is that we are speaking words and moving our bodies in motion and singing vowels out of our bellies, and our whole body is working with that emotion. Emotion is something that needs to be felt fully. And so even though the thing that you're searching for that is what you perceive as holding you back, the thing that you hope is going to answer these questions, even though I'm telling you that that's within you, you need to let it out of you. And the way to let that out is by being, by existing, by moving, by taking action.
By doing.
Yeah.
By doing. That actually goes for a lot of things in life. Like, if people want something and they want change, like a different career path or something like that, the change doesn't come from studying endless days.
Yeah.
And then just not doing anything. It's not reading all about, the psychology of marketing and then not putting it into action. Mm-hmm. You have to put it into action. And that's when the real growth and the progression and the healing happens. It's like everything comes from action. Mm-hmm. So if you want to get out of your grief, maybe just an action maybe for them is to like take a walk.
Oh, walks are great. Walks are great. Drives. Some people can't walk that easily. Like, go to a park and just sit and breathe. Breathing is an action.
Yeah, breathe.
Intentional breathing. Reading. Reading is such a good action.
Why do you think there's so many people who do yoga?
Yoga,
it's meditation,
great actions.
It's meditation and physical movement at the same time.
Absolutely.
It's centering.
I think physical movement is so important. And again, whatever you are able to do, but if you are able to do anything, do it.
Yeah.
Move those arms. Shake those feet.
You don't have to go to the gym and lift weights. You can.
I don't go to the gym.
Yeah, I don't go to the gym either. I do yoga every morning, and I meditate for 5 minutes, and then I do crunches.
Yeah.
Like that's my morning routine, and I'm done within 20 minutes to a half an hour, depending on how intense I'm feeling that day. Maybe your yoga is just stretching. Maybe your movement is just stretching.
I also think that it's so important to just be intentional with all the things that you do. I mean, there's things that you're going to have to do every single day, like probably get out of bed, make your bed, and be present with yourself while you're making it. You deserve to have your bed made nicely. It's kind of theatrical. It's kind of a performance. You're making it a big deal, and you deserve for it to be a big deal. When you cook for yourself, really be intentional with things like your seasoning. Make it all into a moment, because those moments are what's going to be what you're grateful for.
And chances are, if you're cooking for yourself, if you're making your bed and you're making it a big moment, chances are that's how you would do that for someone that you love.
Yeah.
So start doing that for yourself.
Love yourself.
Yeah!
Take care of yourself.
Love yourself, take care of yourself as if you would a romantic partner that we all so desire out there. Mm-hmm. Because of the rom-com.
We all want that story to come true.
I want that story to come true.
Me too.
Oh, man. Well, thank you so much, JK. And for those of you out there who listened to this whole episode, thank you very much. We have a special gift for you. If you go down to the episode description, you'll find a link to get a worksheet with all of the tools to cope with loss and grief and get yourself out of a funk, out of the grief funk, and to get you feeling good and better. And this is not something that we're putting out there to make you forget about your loss. The whole, like JK was saying the whole time, you have to acknowledge it and then accept it and then make progress. You never forget your past. You never forget where you came from. You never forget yourself. You do not have to forget about the time that you had this person in your life, whatever loss you experience. It's not about forgetting that. It's about keeping it with you, but living out your days to the fullest. So click on that link in the description and you'll find the worksheet with all of the tools we talked about in this episode laid out for you. And I want to thank you guys so much for listening.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And with all of the mad sweetness of my heart, have a good one. Bye-bye.